All right, it seems like it's going here. I just like to make sure because it says it on Zoom, but also sometimes it won't be muted and then you'll hear an echo. So I just make sure the sound is off on YouTube on my end. And it is. Okay. All right, everybody, welcome. Welcome to our event today. My name is Raquel Henry, and I am the founder here at Writers Atelier. And for those of you who don't know, Writers Atelier is a online now writing studio, and we host workshops, writing events, and we also do book editing and coaching. We also provide a lot of free resources for writers, so that's one of our favorite things to do. So welcome to our event today with Pamela Ann Harris and Kim Johnson. I'm so excited you're both here. I was telling them earlier that they're two of my favorite writers, so to have them in one place is amazing and also an honor because I get to host them. So thank you both for being here. I'm going to read their bios first, and then I will let them take it away. All right, so here we go. Pamela Ann Harris is the award-winning author of the YA mystery When You Look Like Us, as well as the forthcoming This Town is on Fire. And that just came out on Tuesday, everybody, so make sure you go pick it up. A former school counselor, Pamela works full-time as a counselor educator and trains future school and clinical mental health counselors. When she's not chasing her two kiddos, Pamela enjoys binge watching television shows, eating baked goods, then hopping on her Peloton bike. Welcome, Pamela, or as I like to call her, Pam. And now Kim Johnson. Kim Johnson held leadership positions in social justice organizations as a teen. She's now a college administrator who maintains civic engagement throughout the community while also mentoring Black student activists and leaders. This Is My America was her debut novel. She holds degrees from the University of Oregon and the University of Maryland, College Park. Kim lives her best life in Oregon, which has changed now, with her husband and two kids. Find her at kcjohnsonwrites.com and follow her on Twitter and Instagram at kcjohnsonwrites. And also I'd like to say that Kim also has a new release. It's coming out next week and it's called Invisible Sun. So excited for both books and to hear from you both today. Welcome.
Thank you for having us. Excited to be here. I've always wanted to have a chat with Kim, so this is like, thanks for helping to make that happen, Raquel.
Yes, no, thank you. It's so great to be here, and I'm so excited to talk about Pam because I think we have so many similarities.
Yes.
So it's great to be able to chat in conversation. And I think we're going to just be in conversation with each other. And I wanted to ask the first question to Pam because Pam, you just had your sophomore book just released, like a second ago. And I know I'm going through so many different feelings going through that sophomore book. And so the first question I wanted to ask you is, as your book released, how, if any, has your writing and your perspective shifted from being a debut to now?
Well, I wish I had like a happy story.
Girl.
I think, I mean, it's been a journey. I will say the first time around, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I think there are still aspects of it now. But I think, especially when I was in the midst of writing the second book that came out, here's the cover. I don't have my canvas up yet, but The Town is on Fire. When I was writing it, it was around the same time where I was getting a lot of positive praise for my first novel. And, and I was finding out that it was nominated for a few things. And so it was like this additional added pressure of like, oh, wow. Like, am I supposed to be writing the same exact book? Because I still hear from readers like, are you having a sequel? What's going on? So I think it was a little bit tougher this time around, dealing with turning off that internal editor. I will say that. But I think on the flip side too, like when I find out that things are kind of quiet or when I get certain emails, I have context to it now. Because like for me, when You Look Like This came out, it was like the thick of the pandemic. I think that happened to you for yours too, Kim. And I remember it went through a period. There was a lot of buzz, coming out. And then it kind of like I was just chilling, doing what I had to do. And then like a year later, I start finding out about all these nominations. So I guess all that to say is just because you don't see it every day, just know that like, I realize that my book kind of has like a lasting, lingering impact, even if I'm not personally experiencing it every day. Like I know there is someone that's touching or reading those pages that needed to read it. So I take some comfort in that, knowing that like not every day is going to be like exciting in the publishing world, but it's like exciting when you find out that someone talks about your book and you're like, oh my God, you really did read that. So I think it's like the good and the bad. Is like the bad part is that internal editor. The good part is knowing like certain things to expect this time around, I guess. That was a great question. Thank you. And I was seeing that you were nodding too, because I know yours is coming out. Like, and I'm pretty like, is it pretty much like an experience tell for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say just really briefly is like exactly what you said is exactly how I feel. It's like saying it earlier with Raquel, I didn't know what to expect before. So every little thing was like a little gift. It was like, oh my goodness, oh, this is, and the second time around, because you're not a debut, there's a different kind of push that occurs. And it is hard to just remind yourself that there's so much going on in the background that you don't see. And I think especially with social media, oftentimes that's the only way you see things happening, but that social media has changed so much. And so it's not even the same as like 2020, 2021, that we saw with our books. And so now it's different and figuring out like, okay, what are the patterns that, everything that you said is like exactly how I feel.
Okay. I'm glad I'm not alone. Yes. Well, it's really cool because I had a chance to see you maybe a year or so ago in a presentation or a workshop that you actually provided through Writers Atelier. I think it was a brunch. And during that brunch, I remembered you described your writing or your novels as social justice thrillers or mysteries. And I've borrowed it ever since. I was like, oh my gosh, like that is so money. That is so true. And so I'm curious, like, why is it important for you to integrate, social justice themes in your pieces of fiction?
Yeah, I stole that like concept terminology from Jordan Peele when he talked about his work, which is it's more horror based, but it's all about political and social issues of society, talking about them as real issues. It is almost like it's worse than horror in a lot of ways. And so I like played off of that like terminology. So we've made it a thing. It is a thing. But I do think it's important because there's so many different genres of thrillers. There's eco thrillers. There's family drama thrillers. There's all different kinds. And I do think that there's a different connection in thinking about what a social justice thriller is. And, it's so much with like writing, oftentimes things evolve so much. And I don't know if that will be a term I'll resonate with forever, but it's definitely the term that I feel like I resonate now because there's so much happening and so much has happened in our society, and being able to talk about them, I think with the spin of a thriller, I just feel like it evokes the mind in a really different way where it connects a reader who, whether you're like in it, like you understand it, or you're maybe a little bit distant from it, people want to solve a problem. They want to be a part of resolving something. And I think having it written as a thriller is like a sneaky way to do that. It's like, okay, you solve this mystery, but like, can you solve social justice issues? So yeah, I think that's for me why it resonated, and it really sort of takes the two loves, like my first early reading that I love so much, especially because there was so little diverse representation out there. I found myself being drawn more to mysteries and thrillers because I might not have seen myself in the character, but I could see myself solving the problem in the character. And then I've always been so much social justice leaning that for me, it's like such a great mashup of the things that I'm passionate about and interested in. Yeah.
Love that. Yeah.
I am so curious too about how you kind of think about your work and the inspirations and interests that you have in exploring in your work. And then I have a follow-up question to that, but I'll just start with that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I remember when I was going through my doctoral process and I reached a point where I had to figure out what my dissertation was going to be. And I was like, I don't know. I feel like I care about a lot of things. Like, I don't really know how to like focus in on that. And I remember a professor said to me, like, well, write about what pisses you off. And I was like, oh. And something about that nugget, because it helped me kind of figure out what my research agenda was going to be. But I realized when I applied that to my creative writing, that's when I kind of start gaining more traction. That's when like the deals came along because I was writing about things that I really cared about or that pissed me off. You know, with the first book, it was the whole, you know, epidemic of missing Black girls and not getting enough attention, you know, as their white counterparts. With the one that just came out, it was the whole narrative of the Karens, and you know, because it was thick in the pandemic, I was seeing like a Karen video almost every day. And I was like, well, what would that mean if this really happened to like me when I was in high school? And that was my best friend that ended up being the Karen. And, you know, so that was something that was interesting to me. And even with the draft that I just turned into my editor, thankfully 2 days ago, it was basically, yes, I was like, I don't know how I got it done, but I did. And that one was really pulled from this whole narrative that was going on with Megan Thee Stallion and how everyone was turning against her because she spoke out against a Black man that had harmed her. And, you know, and so it's this whole movement behind believing Black women. And so when I see something, whether it's something that's happening in my professional life, personal life, and current events, if something resonates with me, you know, strong enough that it like really pisses me off, I'm like, okay, I got to tackle this some kind of way. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so similar. I was called bearing witness, and there's so many ideas. I think as a writer, we get so many ideas. And so my follow-up question to you is, and I think a lot of writers kind of have this issue, is how do you know that an idea is actually worth committing to that first draft, or being like, this is the one? How do you know when it is the one that you really, you know?
I think for me, I really think it has to do with first of all, I want to see if I can write like at least 50 pages about it. If I can get to page 50, I'm like, okay, I might be kind of hung up at the moment, but there might be something going on here. And then also if I'm away from the story, but I find myself thinking about it still, even when I'm not in front of my laptop or a notebook, I'm like, okay, this is something that, you know, really means something to me. So I have to see it the way through. So it's being able to see if I could kind of get enough words on the page to at least come up with like a first act or some of a first act. And then also like, wow, I'm still thinking about it even while I'm driving in my car to school pickup. And I'm like, well, I'm thinking about my characters. I'm trying to figure out what's going to happen next. So it kind of has to have that lasting impact where as much as I dread a rough draft, I hate a first draft, but a part of me is excited to kind of sit down and look at that blank page because I want to see what's going to happen, like myself with the characters. So I think that's like the only way for me. Because there's a lot of trope novels that will not see the light of day, but you know, if it's something that I can't stop thinking about, I'm going to see it to the end. Well, and related to that, because I know we're kind of getting into the process and craft and everything. And something that I've noticed, you know, especially with your first novel, is that like you do this excellent job of like characterization. Like I was thinking about like all of like the main character, Tracy, like her friends and how she has a friend whose dad came out of prison, and you could kind of sense that tension and just like childhood crushes. I mean, it was just, I just feel like I knew those characters. So it was like, you do a really great job of character development, but also you're really good about like when the chapter ends, I'm like, what's about to happen? Like I want to move on to the next chapter. So I'm just curious, like, how do you balance that? And then also like, is there a certain one that comes first for you when you're thinking about your story idea? Is it like that pacing, that plotting moving forward, or are the characters the first thing that come to you?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I was really like, as I think and reflect, I feel like I go back and forth. Like I feel at first there's a plot with a particular character. Like usually it's like one character with a particular plot that like sparks the idea. And so then I know what like the big thing is that I want to cover in the book. But then just like you, like I have to write like 20, 30,000 words. If I can write 20,000, 30,000 words, like no plotting, anything, just writing, then I know like, oh yeah, like the character is talking to me. And usually it is characterization. Like usually it's like the characters, and oftentimes the other characters, they kind of, I learn more about them in the next iteration of the drafts. And so it is an iterative process, but usually the main character, I really do know, like their voice has to be so strong to me, like almost like it's talking to me. It sounds weird, but that's how it feels, because then I know like their dialogue, I know their voice, I like know their personality, I know how they would navigate. And then I think about the other characters of like how they balance off of that. And then, you know, having read so many thrillers, loving thrillers, and knowing I'm so busy and knowing this fits really well with young adult readers, especially, is that like pace is so important, because you only can track people's attention because there's so much going on. And so I'll typically, I'll write my chapters, but when I'm doing my revision process, I think about like what is the perfect way to end that last sentence, so that, or that like last paragraph, so that it's sort of like you're ending your scene, the scene is happening, and it either is like at a pivotal moment where like you need to know what's going to happen. Like, so if something's resolved, like even if something was resolved in that chapter, for me, like there has to be another line of like, oh wait, this question has been answered, but now there's another one. Or now this person has to face this particular scenario. And I think that just helps with pacing, especially because for whatever reason, I write long books. I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know why. I don't know why. Both of my books, like if you look online at the hardcover pages, it's 416. Both of them, exactly. That was not planned. I don't know what's wrong with me. And I think over time, I'll find different ways to maybe not have so much in my books. But but
I think that's great, because it just kind of shows like the world building that you're doing, even like in contemporary realistic novels. Mm-hmm. Like there's a lot of world building that goes into that, and I think those elements are important because it helps you care about the characters even more and about what they're going through. Yeah
it's tricky. I'd love to just ask you really quickly too about what comes first with you, because I think you both you have a cast of characters. You have there's always tension, there's always like elements of surprise that's occurring, whether that's emotion or particular situation. How do your stories come to you?
I think so once I kind of get the idea of something that's really irking me, that's going on in the world, I kind of like, I have to like peel back and decide, well, who's like best suited to tell this story? Like for the first one, even though it was about missing Black girls, I really wanted to showcase what families are going through when their loved one is missing and not getting the resources and help that they need. So I really wanted to explore that. And with the second one, I always kind of like, when I write stories now, I try to think of the stories that I would have loved to have had when I was like younger and in high school or middle school. And I'm like, man, like I really want to see this Black girl who awkwardly fits in with the Black group. Like, because when I was growing up, it was mainly my dad was military. The white girls were the ones that befriended me first. And so when I tried to hang out with my Black peers, it was kind of like what are you doing here? And so it was like that awkward thing of trying to fit into both worlds because you wanted to get along with everyone. So I really wanted to see a book where this girl, like her white best friend is like her family, but she also realizes that there's a lot of Black pride going on in her community. So she's kind of wrestling, how do I fit into that zone too as well? And so I think like once I kind of figure out like a major question that I want to answer some kind of way, I just think of like, well, who has the most to gain or lose in that situation? Because there has been a period when I have written something before, and I did, for example, even when You Look Like Us, originally there was a prologue that was actually in the sister's POV. And I mean, but to me, I don't know, like it was good for me writing it because it helped me figure out who her character was. But ultimately we felt like we didn't need it, because it's just, I don't know, it didn't feel right. It seemed like it pulled away from the intensity of the rest of the story. And I think it kind of made more sense to kind of make that character more elusive and not really on the page. So yeah, I think that was ultimately a good decision.
Mhm.
Did I even answer your question?
No, I think so. So we're talking about characterization and thinking
Yeah.
about how your stories, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a fun one I want to ask you because this is something that I struggle with. And when I see like all the stuff that you have going on, Kim, like, like, are you still a provost too as well? Like, are you working in higher ed? Yes. So you're doing that. You have your activism, award-winning author. I'm like, what does a good writing day look like for you? Like, how do you squeeze it all in? Because I still need to know the answer to it myself.
I think it's always changing. So for me, because I've been so busy, it's like, it is my hobby. Like it is that, like, other people, they go on vacations and they exercise or they go run, whatever they do. I don't know what these people do. my like thing that I do, it's writing. And so I haven't really been able to write every day. That's really hard for me because I've got so much going on in my brain. Like my brain just can't do it. I'm so exhausted, like raising kids and all that kind of stuff. And so, if I'm working on something, it's about being really consistent, where those weekends, like I know it's like 3 to 4 hours, Saturday and Sunday, I'm doing it. And then I'll take like a vacation from work, usually between like holidays. I make my big sort of like progression in a novel where I do my fast draft, usually over some holiday time period where I have a little more capacity. And so I'll try to get that like quick draft going and get that momentum going so it doesn't feel like you're sort of like slowly slogging along. But that's how I've really been able to do it. And it does get harder. Like I could do that with the first book, but like with the second book, the time period, it's I think in general, even if I wasn't like, so, have all these other sort of obligations, it is harder because you're on a different pacing. Typically, I think for your most average, writer, is that they've had sort of years kind of working up to trying to get pubbed and all of that. And then you get a deal and then you sell your next book. And then the timeline is so quick. And so I've had to try to find new routines where I am writing more frequently, but I'm definitely not writing daily. Yeah. And I've also found that like past 3 hours, like there's not a lot of good happening after that. Like I found like that's kind of like my max. And even if I'm like revising, like minor revising, it's like I'm not making the kind of progress that I am. Yeah, that's how it works for me. And you have little ones too. So I'd love to hear about how you fit in writing, what your writing patterns look like.
Yeah, it's pretty much, I think we're the same person, Kim.
I know. I really do feel like that. I really do. I can't, like, I'm looking at your like canvas. I'm like, my canvas is like right
Yeah.
We're the same person, guys.
Absolutely. But it's pretty much I have to get a fast draft in. Like, for example, the one that I turned in, and I took an extra 2 weeks to kind of read through it, do some adjustments before sending it to my editor. But the only way that it was done was because this is my teaching term off. So basically I have like a full 8 weeks. We have many masters in my school, in my online program that I teach in. And so, my boss is very good in trying to make sure that we have at least one term off, even though we're 12-month employees, where we're not teaching, we're not grading. And whereas everybody else went on vacation for their teaching term off, I'm sitting here just knocking out like this, this really quick draft just so I can have it done. And actually, I was talking to my cousin Marquita, and she had to point this out to me, and I think she's right, is that I tend to work best under pressure. Like if I know there's a deadline or something that I have to have it done by, if it seems too far in the future for me, it's not going to get done. But I remember I woke up and I blinked and I'm like, oh my gosh, this draft is like due in like 6 weeks. And then all of a sudden it's like the acceleration is on, but it's like, that's my motivation. I knew I had to get it done. Whereas like to me, even 4 months out, even though that's like a perfect time for me to write, it just seemed like it's not within my grasp. Like I almost feel like a middle schooler when I can't think too far in the future, or like the pressure's not on me yet. So that's pretty much, and like I would say like my village is helpful because I do have a 5 and a 2-year-old. So I'm like forced to go into my office sometimes just to get some writing done. My mom is out there helping out. My cousin is out there helping out. But I agree with you. Like I need to have just those 2 or 3 hour spurts, because after that, it's like I'm on Google. I'm like scrolling through social media. Like my mind is just somewhere else. Like if I'm just sitting beyond 3 hours, like I at least need a break to kind of get up, have lunch, watch a reality television show, then maybe kind of get back to it in the afternoon. But I definitely need to step away. Yeah,
Yeah. 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 We're the same person.
absolutely. So true. Oh, one thing too for me, what I love to do, like another thing that's kind of like, is inspirational, kind of help me get my, seeds of thoughts and ideas too, is like I'm a voracious reader, but my reading looks different now. Since I am a mom, I have fallen in love with audiobooks. And that is like the only way. And now, like, because of audiobooks, I inhale like maybe 2 or 3 books a month, which is like a record for me. I haven't been able to do that in a while, but I'm kind of curious, like, especially, writing what you write and like having books to work on. Do you have any like go-to authors or like novels, like for inspiration that kind of really get your juices flowing creatively?
Pam, we're the same person. I used to never really listen to audiobooks.
No.
And I do them all the time when I'm cooking.
Yep.
It really helps me, get through. But I love to see things on the page. And so I found that like when there's deals where you can buy the ebook and then you get the audiobook at like a reduced price, I tend to just do both, just so that I can, if I
That's
want,
a good
if I want to be able to
idea.
see it on the page.
Yeah.
And so that helps me a lot. And I find like, because I've been so busy with everything going on, it's been harder for me to read a lot. And picking up other people's work, it's been really, really hard. And so the audiobooks have helped me a ton to be able to do that. But whenever I'm writing something, I like to read within that space.
Okay.
I know there's a lot of people who don't, like, they can't, they're like, okay, if I'm doing this, and I'm gonna do nonfiction, or if I'm doing this, I need to, write something, like listen to something totally different. And I will balance it nonfiction, but usually it's because of research. So usually it's like I'm reading some, because so many of the issues that I write about have historical context or particular context. And so reading nonfiction does help me, but it's kind of like research. And so it really kind of depends on like what I'm, working on. I'll read actually more adult sometimes, just so that I can kind of expand how I'm thinking about a story, and not, having things sort of seep into my brain that might be within this similar kind of space. I do find that I tend to do that. And because I write thrillers, like I love different kinds of writers. So I love reading Jesmyn Ward, she's not a thriller writer, but I just love her, how evocative she is and visceral she is with her writing, and the command that she has with her writing. And then I'll do a lot of like Ruth Ware with that like slow, because I'm so fast paced with my storytelling. It's really great for me to like Ruth Ware, because Ruth Ware is like so great about slow thrillers that like not a lot seems like it's happening, but like that tension is like, oh my God, what's gonna happen next? It's like 3 chapters of them like in the kitchen or whatever. Like, not a lot going on. But yeah, I'll still do like young adult, but I find I'm really listening to and reading a lot of adult connected with my work. What about you? Yeah, curious about you.
That's the same with me. I've been noticing that I'm veering a lot more towards adult, like kind of mystery thrillers now too, because I feel like, not only is it like a preferred, genre of mine, but it's like it also kind of helps me with my own writing. Even though I do write YA, I'm like, wow, like, I learn a lot of methods, like, like the sitting in the suspense, or, even the way that a character moves from one scene to the next. Because that used to be like the biggest hang up of mine. And then I get to kind of like see how other authors are doing it, and I pick up certain things. But for me, like I love like Kelly Garrett, who did this. I mean, it was a phenomenal one about a sister.
Just like a sister. It's so good.
Yes,
yeah.
I loved it. I loved it. And I got so excited because she has another one that'll be coming out like shortly too as well. But I love that. I'm listening to my favorite. I guess I have a thing about sisters, but something called My Favorite Sister by Jessica Knoll, who also wrote The Luckiest Girl Alive. And I'm like, and again, and this is like a long book. But it's like I'm still very curious about, like, I just love like the tension and the different perspectives. And I'm like, wow, because I'm actually thinking about writing something from multiple POVs, and I'm like seeing how she's doing it. And it's like I'm intrigued by each and every character, but they all sound so different. So I think that's amazing. And in the YA realm, like my auto buy is Tiffany Jackson. I just love everything she does. I just think she's amazing. Even like her venturing off into the horror space. Like I think like, to me, like picking my favorite Tiffany Jackson book is like picking my favorite Beyonce song. So today I think it is like Weight of Blood, which is horror, which I used to read a lot of horror when I was younger. So I wasn't really sure if I was going to be into it now, but man, that is like, I like literally tell everyone, like, if you want to know about good writing, please pick up any book from her, but especially that one, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah. And, I've loved watching her career too, because she's in, she really does, like, I think similar to us, stuff ripped from the headlines, kind of stories, but love seeing her kind of expand in the different ways, which I think is so great as a writer, to think about how your career, you're not in a box. You don't have to, if something comes to you, that you can be in that space. So
I love that. I love when authors that are kind of known in like one area or genre kind of really branch out. I think Stephanie Perkins even did that. Like she was really known as this light rom-com, and then she was like, you know what, I'm going to throw a thriller / horror in there. And, she had that adapted to a Netflix movie. So she's doing something right.
Yeah.
Yes. I also want to be able to talk to you. It's kind of similar. I think it's opposite what I did. But I noticed in your first novel, you wrote from a female POV, and now with Invisible Sun coming out on Tuesday, this is coming from a male narrator or a male lead. And so I just kind of like, I'm curious about how that transition does of like, writing from a different gender perspective, and maybe even why behind that. Like, what was that process like for you?
Yeah, so many people, especially when I was doing like school visits, I would have like young people who'd be like, I love seeing Tracy. Like it was so important for me. My first book with This Is My America, Tracy was like fearless and relentless and determined and, unapologetic in so many ways. And so many young people love seeing that in a character, because we often don't get a chance to see it in a character. But then I had so many people who were asking about the male characters in my story. They're like, we want a Quincy story, we want a Jamal story, we want a Dean story. And so as I was really thinking about my next book, the characters really just came to me. And Andre, the main character of, I should mention, of Invisible Sun.
I love that cover. I love it.
Chuck Stiles is the illustrator, and he is just amazing. And he did This Is My America, and he's doing my third book too as well. But it's so interesting because I think my oldest now just turned 16, my son, and I have a daughter who's 9. And the stories, in terms of gender, like the stories come to me in different ways. And I think for whatever reason, I have a voice for it. I think, I don't know, maybe other people will disagree, but I feel like I have a voice for it. And even my third novel that will come out next year, it's from a male protagonist's voice. And as I'm thinking about my next, like there's a couple other, I have a short story with Voice Magazine that is coming out that I'm like, oh, I want to write the full novel of that. But then I'm like, okay, that will be 3 male POVs in a row. Do I want to do that? So I'm kind of dancing around with that. But I do think it's important to, you have to read a lot in that space if you're not as, comfortable with it. And it can be tricky, I think, but I really do enjoy writing from the male perspective, and I feel like I've had so many Black men around me that that boyhood it comes to me really easily. So yeah, and then we did the opposite. So I'd love to hear for you about like when you think about your choosing what POV to tell a story from.
Yeah, I used to always joke that it was always easier for me to write from a male POV than a female POV. Like I struggled with my female characters, but as the second book, of course, that came out is a female POV, and the third one I just turned in will also be a female POV. And I did some self-reflection, and I think even just listening to you talk about it too as well, kind of like put the pieces in place for me. I think I was so drawn to writing from a male POV earlier in my career. It's because I think a lot of the decisions and the motivations I think was more acceptable for it to be a male character, but but if I did it as a female character, I feel like, oh, automatically she's going to get pinned as being unlikable. That's why I love the fact that, Tracy for you was like just so fearless that she just, do. I remember I was listening to that first chapter, and I was even telling this to Marquita. I was like just on the edge of my seat just for a television interview, just thinking like, oh my God, is she going to like say something? And is her brother going to get mad? And I just kind of love the decision she's made. And it was like, she's apologetic about it, but she has like, her heart is in the right place.
Yeah.
And I think in trying to keep that in mind, like, I need to stop worrying about whether or not my characters are going to be likable. Especially like they're teens, like we're humans, period. Like even as an adult now, I'm going to make mistakes. I still make mistakes, things that I kind of regret and wish I could do again. And I think I need to be able to give my characters that same grace and kind of like show like, hey, girls can be just as sloppy too. They're not always going to do the right thing. So we need to kind of like stop holding them to like the same standard. Like even if I'm watching a movie or a television show, and let's say like I see Marquita here, we're like complaining about a character, and she'll even let you know that I'll pause and say, wait a minute, are we saying this because she's a female character? Like, will we be just as appalled if a male character did that? Yes. And so I see Marquita saying the feedback from agents, like even I would give like a little, I think it's more even just gender. I think it's race. Because one time when I was on submission with the story with a male lead, I got so much positive feedback. And this is before the time when I kind of wanted to start having my voice. And so my male character was white. He was a white male. And I remember when I got like a lot of revise and resubmit from editors. And so I told my agent, I'm like, you know what? My character is going to be Black. I need to write from the Black experience because I don't know why I keep tap dancing around this. So like the main thing that changed in that revision was that my character moved from being a white male to a Black male, still did the same things, still kind of made the same choices. And then the feedback I got from editors was so drastically different. Like he came across as aggressive and rude, whereas before he was just kind of funny and gullible. And I'm like, the only thing that changed was that he even talked the same. Like he wasn't even doing like this, like, kind of like stereotypical way that you would assume that a Black boy his age would talk because of the environment he grew up in. He talked the same way as that character that I envisioned, but because they knew he was Black, it was like that feedback on him was so harsh. So it's just, and I think because of all that, some of that seeps into my head, but it's like, I think I've just gotten to a point now, it's like, I don't care. this character is going to make these decisions, and that's just how it's going to be because, I'm writing about realistic people. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's so true, seeing how people's perspectives are different. Because I even think about, and I'm sure you've gotten this kind of feedback, is that even though I write social justice thrillers, I'm very clear about like I'm writing from a particular experience on particular issues that, you know, in America are often divisive. And people always want to they ask me different questions, like, what was the lesson there? In a way that like with other books, they're like, or like, you know, like it didn't clean up that, like it didn't clarify that lesson for me, you know, like you'll get some like review feedback and it's like, you know, like actually you know, I don't know if I had a lesson, like you can take away from it what you want to take away from it, but I didn't have a particular lesson. I'm hoping it opens up a conversation and opens up a perspective if you're not coming from that experience. But yeah, I'm curious about like how you sort of, your work's been received, because it's like all of a sudden you know, it's like there's a certain kind of like, this is great to teach kids, you know, like I get a lot of that. And in some ways I'm like, yeah, I want to, but I'm like, you know, in some ways, but like, that's not fully what I'm trying to do here.
No, oh my gosh, I think you're so right. I really do. I have noticed, you know, especially when I get invitations for When You Look Like Us, it's like they want it to be about me, you know, almost kind of teaching something to someone, you know, and I'm like, well, I could talk about pacing. I could talk about character development. I don't necessarily have to talk about what it means to be an advocate. I mean, even though I love that, I do that a lot with my counseling work too as well, but it's like, I don't know. I get that a lot. And I remember even one reviewer, because I hate reading reviews, but I remember, because it was a good review, but at one part they said was, because there was like a thread of hope that happened at the end of my first novel. And I remember it was just something like, though the ending wasn't realistic. And I'm like, why couldn't, and everything else was, I couldn't even tell you all the great things it said, because it overwhelmingly was positive. But then I heard that my ending wasn't realistic, and I'm like, well, why can't Black people just be happy? Like, why, like, why does it have to end with like somebody sobbing on the street, or I don't know. So it's either like teaching me a lesson, or like making sure that like, well, I like my Black people better when they're sad and in pain, and I'm just like, well, we have layers to us, you know. Even when I'm going through hard times, I laugh about something. That's just how like my family, that's our love language. We process through laughter, through food, through like, you know, getting together. So yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah. And I feel like we're opening up Q&A.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know if there's any questions. We should have given a heads up.
Do you all have, the folks watching on YouTube as well, and also here on Zoom, do you all have any questions? I'll open it up to you all first. If not, I will ask a question. And I think since it's 1:15, maybe we could take like probably do up to 2 questions, just to make sure we end on at the right time here. You all can put it in the chat if you would like to. I'm like bouncing back and forth. If you see me kind of looking off to the side, it's because I'm looking to see on YouTube here too. But while we're waiting to see if anybody has questions, you can put it in the chat. I wanted to just let you all know, Jennifer Baker said, definitely relate to what Kimberly said, writing timeline. So.
Jennifer, hey!
Everybody loves Jennifer, yeah.
Well, it seems like nobody has any questions here, but I'll ask a question that I have. You all know that, I think both of you know that I'm kind of big on like mindset work, right? And so what happens when you get that rejection, or maybe you're facing a series of rejections? How do you pick yourself up? And actually, this will just be the last question we take, just because we want to wrap on time here for Kim. So would you all like to answer that really quickly?
Yeah, I'll go first. Just have to exit a little early. You know, it was hard. I do think that finding a literary agent, the process, it was painful, honestly, to get these rejections, but it was helpful. Like, it did teach me about pacing and write, you know, how do I write a cover flip for my, you know, book, a query, those kinds of things. Because I was in a space of progress. And I think writers are pretty honest about the experience querying and the industry. And I think for those that are, in the process of trying to find an agent or going through that editor process, just recognizing that it can take time. It's more common for it to take time. And I always just I took it as pain, like it was painful, but I always took it as a lesson, like, oh, man, okay, so what am I going to do? And sometimes that motivated me to query more people. And sometimes that motivated me to try a new project and write something new, because I knew I want to be a writer with a lot of different books, that come out. And maybe this isn't the one right now, but there could be others. And I think thinking about it in that way, what can I learn from it? Whether that's refining like truly who your voice is, of like, okay, this agent did not get who my voice is. They might have even given me feedback. Is that the way I want to tell my story? No. So I know that this agent wouldn't have been a good fit for me. That's a great lesson to be able to learn of like, okay, now I'm going to seek other kind of things. So yeah, that's what I would say. Just keep moving, like take the lesson and keep moving. And then it'll help you for the future when, you don't want to look at reviews anymore when your books are out, because you're like, whatever.
I love that. No, everything that you said, I co-sign with. And, even for me, even after I got my agent, I was like on the submission process for like almost a decade before I got my book deal. I think I went through like 4 manuscripts. And when I look back on the edit now, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that those, even the close calls, even though they stung at the moment, like I went to acquisitions, like I had like the editor in my corner, but for some reason we just never kind of, got through towards the deal. I just was like, okay, you know what? I've learned from all those books and made me a stronger writer. Because even the 3rd book that I just submitted to my editor was one of the books like almost a decade ago I went on submission with, but it's like I like completely gutted it basically. The main thing that's the same is the characters, but I'm just glad that I had a chance to shine that up, and it didn't get published at the time because I don't think it was ready for it yet, and I'm not sure if I was necessarily ready to. So I agree with that, like, taking those rejections as something like, well, how can I grow as a writer? Like, all it takes is one yes. I had to keep that in mind. I think it's also really great to have like cheerleaders in your life, because even after you've like been published, like, believe me, that self-doubt is still there.
Yeah.
Like I had a Raquel Henry had to write and tell me, you are Pamela Harris, the day of my launch. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes. And so like, that's something that like I've had to tell myself this week, like I am Pamela N. Harris. I am NAACP Image Award nominated Pamela N. Harris. Like I could always say that with me, no matter what I do in life, that is something I can carry with me. So I think, I would say definitely learn from those experiences, the rejections, and also make sure you have like a really strong support system in your corner to kind of be that voice you need to hear when you're feeling down,
So true.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Great responses to that question. Thank you both. And I think we're going to go ahead and wrap here. Thank you both so much for joining us today. This was such a fun chat. Everybody, please go get Invisible Sun and also Pam's new title, This Town is on Fire, and put the links for y'all in the chat. We'll also put them on YouTube, and then also we'll be reposting this video, so everybody, they missed it, they can also watch it.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Raquel, and thank you, Kim. I
Thank you.
love being able to chat with you. This has been so
Me too.
much fun.
I found my other partner in very similar.
All right, everybody. Thanks for
All
watching.
right. Thank you.
Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.